I cover quite a number of sections in our presentation. And really starting with the initial part of our presentation, which is really a very broad understanding in terms of why transformation in South Africa has been important and how does it really intend to impact in terms of the economy, but more specifically our business as real estate agencies. We will also talk about the scope of the sector, how big is our sector, and how big is actually our contribution of the property sector in terms of the South African economy. And where do we fit in that economy in relation to many other economies, the 23 economies that we currently have in our country. We will also talk about the sector code. What does the sector code mean in relation to a generic broad-based economic empowerment scorecard? How do we apply that sector code scorecard? We'll talk about the revision of a scorecard, its importance, why we're revising the scorecard, and any of those changes that we have. And lastly but not least, we'll also talk about the implication of the amendment bill and the verification process. We start our presentation really with the first slide that talk about or really attempt to answer the question, what is transformation? It is an integral and coherent socio-economic process that directly contributes to the economic transformation of a country, and it also brings about a significant increase of the previously disadvantaged to play a meaningful participation in the mainstream economy. We expand broadly and in detail in relation to what that means. But also the understanding of it also comes importantly by actually who are the custodians of broad-based economic empowerment, and really how do they intend as part of their mandate to actually drive this, and why do they drive it? It is important for us to understand why transformation has become necessary in South Africa. We actually, amongst others, you would know that one of our three challenges that we have, which is unemployment, inequality, and poverty, that part of it is really to address some of those challenges that we have. Attempt to address the inequalities in all spheres of life that has been caused by our previous system. One of the steps also, this is a strategic move in particular to achieve economic transformation that addresses those inequalities. But importantly, this is a pragmatic growth strategy that addresses both economic development but also social development, where, as I said earlier, it enables the previously disadvantaged to play in the mainstream in the economy with all its citizens. But it is important not only for its people, but also for all our enterprises in the country. So this growth strategy that we have with BEE, it's for growth, and it also addresses development. And you would understand that development is really one of those pillars or strategic pillars that we have that really addresses the future of where we are actually going. A lot of the times when we talk about transformation and we talk about BEE, to a lot of us, we talk about a scorecard. A lot of us, we talk about, are you level 1, level 2, level 3, or whatever the level is. But what is most important about transformation, it's probably least importantly what we normally refer to. What is most important about transformation, it's its impact on our economy. And that impact is all about sustainability, profitability, growth, innovation, global competitiveness, and all of those things that are in the board. We actually do all of this because we do really want to be globally competitive. You become globally competitive because as you actually, from a transformational perspective, as you actually add people to play, you start to play in your stream, you start to actually attract income streams. When you attract income stream, you start to grow. When you start to grow, you start to actually think about various things of the way I should be marketing, the way I should actually be going to those people all about. That's all about innovation. When you start to grow, you talk about profitability. But what is even more important to us, and right now, today in our economy, it's about sustainability. We need it more than ever before. We need to create the sustainability in our economy. So we do talk about BE, and we talk about Scorecard, and we talk about everything else. But one of them, those are the few most important things that we probably don't say a lot more about. But that is actually what the drive is all about. It's about creating that sustainability in our economy. We need to be growing our economy at 6%. We're hardly getting to 2% right now. And you would know the challenge that we have. I mean, last night, the dollar was about 14.69? It's actually 2013 to a pound. A rand to a pound, 2040. I mean, when last did we see ourselves being in the span? They're saying actually if we continue in the same way, we probably would be starting to register recession in the next quarter. But these are the things that we have to talk about, and we have to address all of these challenges for our own economy. The question is, can BEE be legally imposed on you? Certainly not. It is not a legally bounding obligation for any companies to comply. But we do know that it is an important factor and aspect to all our businesses that is being conducted in our country. We also do know that those people that are considering, of course, to successfully be working in government in any sphere or linked in any form to that, maybe to the banks who have their own sector charters themselves and would also want to get a very good procurement scorecard, they'll probably require the same from you. So it is not a legally binding obligation, but it is a one that we do know its importance because of our own businesses. A lot of people do ask, is this affirmative action? No, it's not. But employment equity is part of it. It is really a growth strategy that is targeting really our weakest link in our economy. And we'll talk about really how excluding, if you exclude some parts of your economy, impacts on or threatens the sustainability of our economy. And this is when we talk about it. The question is, who is responsible? Who is the custodian of transformation? It's the Department of Trade and Industry. What is its mandate? Its mandate is to drive trade and to attract investment in our country. That's all they do, trade and investment. But more importantly, in that mandate, why? The answer is to grow our economy. They attract trade, they attract investment in order to grow our economy. But in growing their economy, they've got to come up with strategies. How are we going to grow our economy? They've got 5 mission statements. One of them is inclusive growth. Inclusive growth is, how do we get everybody to be involved in the economy in order for us to grow the economy that we need to grow? That's inclusive growth. And in that mission, BEE or transformation, it's one of the tools. There are many other tools. There are women economic empowerment tools. There's disability empowerment programs. There are many others. BEE is one of them. The point, though, is there is no economy that will be able to optimize its growth without including all its participants to participate in the mainstream of the economy. We will not even by chance or even the slightest chance be able to see the growth that we want to see unless all the citizens of the country are able to play in the mainstream economy. That 6% growth that we dream about, that would give us the growth that we know or we would like to all desire to have, can only be achievable when everybody starts to play in the mainstream economy. And I always give an example that years ago, in the UK, when England went to war, and the males that mainly used to work in the factory had to now be deployed to war fields, the females took over the factories. they started working in the factories. And the war ended. The male came back, and they say, well, we're back. You can go back home and take care of the homes. And they said, no, we're here to stay. And the economy started to surpass the expectations, the planned expectations, and it went far surpassed beyond. That's because everybody was starting to play in the mainstream. There was space for everybody to participate, to be able to play in the mainstream. So for us to be able to realize the desired growth that we really need to see, we actually have to create space for everybody to play in the mainstream. And you would probably, a lot of you would recall, years ago, for those of us that have been in the industry, you would recall the 27 growth, the 10-year growth that we saw, started to peak in the 2007, 2008. What did it mean to our business, specifically our real estate agencies? Yes, there was a boom. Those were the good days. Those were the days when you were registered. Of course, that was before NCA, yes, I recognize that. But that was the days when we were recognizing, and we saw lots of transaction pulling through. Those are the days we all wish for. So the link between the growth of our economy is directly linked and directly influences our business. We need to get the growth of our economy to actually get to that space and that times when we were able to register transactions, where we were able to sell houses. We actually didn't have enough feet, we didn't have enough hands, we didn't have enough time. Transactions were going through, people were buying houses, banks were approving the sellers, thing. It was just really, it was really our space and time where really we saw a lot of our state agencies starting to grow and boom. And that is the kind of space that we need to create. But not only for now, we need to create a sustainability factor at those times. And of course, there'll always be peaks and troughs when you talk about the economy. It grows and of course it takes its dips. But we need to create that sustainability where you are able to register reasonable number of sales a month that actually creates a sustainability to our business. We don't want at times where you actually start to wonder, oh, is this month a good month, or will I even register anything at all? That should not be even a suspicion in our mind. To actually create that sustainable growing economy that will enable our agencies to be able to grow. But only that growth does not only support our agencies, it supports a number of elements. It supports a number of elements also in terms of growth of our banks. Banks being able to lend, our banks being able to take certain number of risk, being able to give even a certain number of funding to our applicants. So we do need to consider that. So as we said, this inclusive growth, this is one tool of the many tools that the DTI has in order for us to grow the economy. And this tool is the BBBEE, broad-based Black Economic Empowerment. It's a tool that drives the transformation to actually create everybody to play a part in the mainstream economy. And it uses those 7 elements as you have it on the board: ownership, management control, employment equity, skill development, preferential procurement, enterprise development, socio-economic empowerment. Those are the elements that it uses to actually transform. And if done properly, all of those elements, you are able to transform the economy fully. And everybody is meant to be touched by all of those elements. The question is how? Well, let's look at that. At the very bottom of our economy, people that are living with poverty, you've got employment equity and socio-economic development. Socio-economic development is what we refer to as CSI. It's when you give your blankets, it's when you give those tin stuffs to those people that live under the grant economy. They are unemployed, they live under the poverty barrier. That's socio-economic empowerment. But when you talk employment equity, that you start to absorb them into the work field. And that's exactly what we need to do. We actually need to be driving more employment equity than socio-economic development. We need to get these people into the working stream so that they're not so dependent into the grant, so that we don't put so much into the tax that goes to the grant system. So we need to be pulling these people. We need, when we talk about creating jobs, it's so that we have a lot more people that are in the workspace so that they don't rely on the grant system. then our tax can then be dispersed to address all other elements that we have that are of need to the development of our country. So when we're talking a grant system, we're really talking about these elements. It's addressing the poverty barriers. We also talk of skill development. Skill development is when you start to get all these unemployed graduates, when you take these artisans that are starting to come into the employment schemes. And they come in and they go through the various levels of management and they really break through the skill barrier. At the next level, we talk about self-employed people, the entrepreneurs. These are the people that we procure from through procurement, preferential procurement. These are the people that we start to enterprise as small entities, enterprise development, that start to break the barriers there. Beyond that, you also then have people that own businesses. These are the owners at employment equity. Of course, these are obviously at the high brink of our economy, but you also have people that are directors of organizations. These are the people that start to actually direct where the companies are going. These are the people that make strategic decisions as directors, or they make operational decisions as executive directors at management control. So using this economy, those 7 elements of the broad-based economic empowerment, everyone would find their space. That's why when you talk about, if implemented properly, everybody will be positively touched by the 7 levels of transformation. And I hope that really starts to talk about why this transformation, why is it necessary, but it's all about the importance of creating sustainability into our economy. When we start to understand our property sector, I mean, all of what we've been talking about is about generically why this thing has been important, but we need to hone it back down as close as possible to us and to our business. And the question is actually, when we talk about the property sector, who are we referring to? The two main sectors, which are really commercial, is what we all know. And of course, even more closer to home is the residential industry. Those are the 2 main industries that we all know so well that are as part of the property sector. We'll talk about the zoned land just now. In the commercial space, we've got the 4 sectors. You've got office space, you've got industrial, you've got retail, and you've got leisure. That's what drives the commercial industry. And incidentally, I just actually read that South Africa it's the 5th country that has the number of malls that it has after UK, US, Canada, Japan, or 6th, Japan and China. We have over 2,500 malls. And that's where the growth, the retail industry is. And we only have 50 million population. I can understand China, and the rest, Japan, UK, Canada, US, they are very developed countries. You actually start to wonder in terms of that. But we'll talk about how big is this industry, but in relation to actually the residential sector. And as you know, what would make up part of the residential sector is our houses, the freehold, the leases, and of course our community schemes that are growing very rapidly. Last but not least, which is actually one of the subsectors that we have, is zoned land. Zoned land is part of the property sector, but it's either zoned for commercial development or zoned for residential development, but it has to be zoned. If it's not zoned, it's either agricultural or it's either forestry or something else. But for us, what we count as the property sector, it has to be zoned land. The question is, how big is this industry? If you had to actually put a value on every single building you see in a property industry, and this is the study that we did in 2012, and we'll talk about the recent study that the review of the study now. The property sector is 4.9 trillion rand. The major part of that 4.9 trillion rand, that is 3 trillion, is residential. The balance of the 1.9 trillion is commercial, which is referred here as non-residential. And of course, you will see when we talked about retail, it's obviously been led by retail. Retail is all shopping centers at 340 billion rand. And these are really relatively very accurate figures. The commercial really, they pride themselves actually in being able to be able to quantify their subsegments. I mean, one of the ones that are slightly questionable is actually the leisure market, because some of the guest houses, you can't really, they haven't been registered, so you can't really equate much. But in terms of retail, office space, industrial, we can actually tell you how much square meters, how much in total, what is the square meters in the country in relation to that. And we also have the public sector. And really, I need to actually put a big disclaimer in terms of the public sector that at the time when we did the study, we didn't even have the asset register. We do now. We are reviewing the study, and we've got the asset register. We've got the country, the national and the provincial asset register. So you will see those numbers bumping up quite significantly as well. But what is also important here is that we've got the residential is 3.0 trillion. It's actually 3 trillion of that 4.9 trillion. So it's actually the biggest sector that is driving the industry today. We also have that zoned land that I'm referring to, which is at 520 billion rand. And it's actually quite a small section of that. It's about 1.1% of the total land that we have. So that is actually the total amount and the total contribution of our industry. So it's actually very big. We used to be actually the third biggest sector after mining and manufacturing. And I can't say actually now, after the long industrial strike last year with the mining, that we probably, after the mining has taken its own dip, that we're probably the second biggest sector. We are doing the review in 2040. We only count as the property sector zoned land. It has to be zoned for commercial development or zoned for residential. Anything else would be agricultural, it would be forestry, it would be all other land that is not part of what we refer to under the property sector. And we know that we are reviewing the study now, and we know that the industry is probably going over 6 trillion. We're going over 6 trillion. It's actually over 6.5 trillion that we're going over. Because we know that 780 billion rand in the commercial is about, it's 1.3 trillion now. I have the numbers now. We know how that commercial has grown, is 1.3 trillion. The residential has grown by about 30%. Last year we closed the year residentially, the transactions we do were 52 billion rand. And if you take your 5% commission, that's about 2.6 billion rand that we made last year, just on residential, on all the transactions that have gone into the deeds office. So that growth has actually been registered, it's over 30% growth. And of course, the public sector that has grown quite a bit. Zoned land, obviously, as you release land, there's more land that you go, so we refer that as slightly stable. So those numbers will be coming up towards the end of the year in terms of the review of that study. So you won't be surprised when you see that industry growing as far as over 6.5 trillion rand. So basically, the next study that we have, that we will be doing, and where we will be releasing the numbers towards the end of the year, we'll obviously be doing a lot more with, obviously, the public sector, which is really looking at the asset register nationally and provincially. We've added the 9 metros, we've added the state-owned enterprises. But also in the residential, what we didn't have in that 3 trillion that we had in the 2010 and in this one, is that we also add in the informal-formal settlement. So those informal settlements that are recorded as formal, and maybe not in a usual sense that every house is recorded in the deeds office, but they are recorded in the deeds office, that will still yet to be included. We had the deeds office that says we had our backlog, we can give you our backlog. We had the bank that had their backlog. We had Department of Human Settlement that also have their backlog that we're adding. So you would see when we talk about that market growing from that 4.9 trillion to about over 6.5 trillion to 7 trillion, that is actually the growth that we are seeing there. So that is then of our sector. And we know, of course, that, I mean, in terms of our sector that we said is 52 trillion, and of course the commission there, but we also did, when we did the average transaction of our houses was about, when we took actually, it was about 560, when we took actually the 810 and the 810 and about 310 to do an average. And of course we would know, and again, in the EAB, according to our database at the State Agency Affairs Board, we know 62% of our state agencies have got only about 1 to 5 estate agents, and only 18% has got over an average of anything between 6 and 10 estate agents. So basically that starts to show you that majority of that income starts to grow to go to the bigger agencies. But not only did we stop at understanding what was the size of that property sector, we also had to understand the actually economic impact of our sector. We wanted to understand basically what is the sector contributing to the national economy. And it's been very clear. We contribute 191 billion rand to the GDP. Of that 191, 104 billion rand is contributed by the residential sector. The balance of the 81 billion rand is from the commercial sector. And we did this study by really taking the life cycle of a property. Every property has got origination, management, and it's got disposals. And as you take the life cycle of every property, you'll see that the commercial is contributing that very much, and we did that study. And in between each of these life cycle, whether it be in origination or at management, they are facilitators. They are people that play. And we found out, I mean, amongst others, I mean, management, we know that we actually contribute, we're one of our strongest lifeline of the financial sector. One of the biggest contributors to the banks is actually insurance. That is directly contributed by the property sector. The insurance business of actually insuring houses and the rest of everything else, household content, comes from the residential sector. So that is the biggest contributor to also. So as much as we're contributing what we're contributing, we also have that direct contribution as well via other financial sectors as well. But also, importantly, we contribute to the fiscus, to our taxes. The residential industry contributes 20 billion rand. The balance of the 25 billion rand is contributed by the commercial sector to the fiscus. With all of those, I'm hoping that you start to realize that, or basically even understand the importance of transformation in our economy. Why was it even important? I hope you understand the sustainability, how we actually intend to sustain our economy, but more so by understanding that value contribution to our economy through GDP, through taxes, but also through the size, our sheer size of our industry and its magnitude and its contribution to that. We've spoken generically about what transformation is all about. We've been able to link that to our industry, to saying this is our sector, this is the size of our sector, this is our contribution to our economy. It is even more prudent for us to start to say, what does it mean to me, to my agency, my province? How are we performing and how does that lie in relation to this transformation? We need to be able to, when we talk transformation, what does it mean to our agency, to our provinces? How have we been performing? And I'll show you some of the stats that we have now. But I've started the stats actually by showing you basically the South African demographic statistics. And I use both the 2006 and the 2011. Really to also show the movement of this. And really, I'm hoping to link this to be able to say, when we say you have to actually include everybody to play in the mainstream economy, we are talking being able to include everybody to play meaningfully as a participant in our economy. We currently have 7.9 or 7, it moved from 7, well, still remains 7.9 with an odd change there, African participants, populations. We've got 8.9 white population in our country, 2.7 that remains unchanged of Indians, and then 8.9. The point when we say we actually have to include, for us to grow the economy at the level, is that everybody has to play in the mainstream economy. Similarly, the gender statistics. There's 52% female in our population. 48 are male. The point is, whether be male or be any racial group, we have to play in the mainstream economy if we are able to be able to get the desired growth in terms of our economy. Never mind now the demographics. Let's talk about our state agency. And I did this the 2011, 2012, and trust me, I did the 13 and the 2014. At the time when we sent the presentation, we had to confirm, we had with the CEO of the state agency affairs board, also we did the 2013-14, and by the time we sent the presentation, he hadn't seen those numbers. But the numbers have not changed any differently. Trust me, I could actually change the years, the numbers will remain the same. The underlying message is that the estate agents, we've actually, obviously over time, and we know actually how that number, when I was there in 2007 and 2008, there was a time, and for those of you that have been there that long, you would recall when we had over 60,000 estate agents. Do you recall those days? Yes, when the economy was booming, when we were growing, when we were strong. But of course, the numbers have come down, and those numbers have stayed relatively the same. At 2013, 2014, we remained relatively at the 41,000 brink in terms of our state agents. The point, though, also is that we haven't changed much. The numbers hasn't changed between whether the numbers, and I'm saying again, whether it's 2013 and 2014, the numbers hasn't changed much. But you will see here the changes. There was only an insignificant growth, and the numbers remain the same even today. There was only 347 estate agents that has grown. But where does that 347 come? Majority of it, the growth of it, and the majority of the split, and it's always, again, the same. The biggest, anything between 80 and 85 is driven by Gauteng, Western Cape, and KZN. And of course, the smallest growth in terms of other provinces has been Free State, Limpopo, and Northern Cape. So basically, you would see over 80% again is driven by those three provinces, Gauteng taking the majority share of this growth, and then again, once again, the other provinces really taking a share of that, the small growth that we currently have. The growth that we have, majority of those estate agents came from Gauteng. Of course, you lost some in Cape Town, but the majority of the loss was in, a bit of the loss was in KZN at 57%, and the balance of it was just the rest of others that actually about 159% of other provinces. But the point as well, coming to linking all of the elements of transformation and also to our national, our residential estate agents statistics, 86% of our estate agents are white, nationally. Only 14% are black. Out of the demographics that we were talking about of 79% demographics in the country. And then only, of course, out of that 14%, that's made up of the 7 and the 6, and I think that in another insignificant, there was a 0 point something that adds up to about 14. With KZN been actually having a better comparative statistics at 18% compared to at 82% estate agents, 18% that are black at KZN. And then Western Cape, of course, having smaller statistics of 8% black participant in the estate agents. And 2012, again, and that's my point, which is why I'm showing this separately, the numbers don't change much. You'll see again, it's about 14%, this is 13, 14, more or less the same. Limpopo actually showing good performance of 27% black estate agents that are participating in Limpopo, and then Western Cape playing actually having the smallest statistics of black participant at 17%. Another statistics that has stayed exactly the same is that there are more female, this is one sector where there are more female participants than any other sector. However, at the agents level, there's more females at 55% than males at 45%. So more females, and both, whether you look at those, any of the years, the females remain the same. But at a principal level, the numbers reverse. There's less females at 44% than there are males at principal level, not at the estate agency level. So the numbers start to reverse when you start to see the gender statistics. And you also see that at gender statistics at the principal level as well, at the females, there were 8% participant females at principal level, and they were at this point at 11, and I think there could have been a mistake from the numbers that we got, because you will see that in 2012 this changes significantly to about close to 10%. So you'll see that exactly that. At males in 2010, that changes to about 20%. But the point, though, is that at principal levels, actually, there's even more, less black participants at principal level. But you'll also see at that intern and attorney level, in 2010-20 level, there's more females than males. There's more females than males, but also there's a higher pull-through of a number of black estate agents that are coming through. You can see that 39%. And now our challenge is actually pulling them through so that they start to practice full-time, because I'm assuming a lot of them are intern. I would be interested, as a matter of fact, with the one agency, one learner, to start seeing how that number has changed. And I can bet that with that number of participants, this number has changed significantly. But our challenge remains, how do we pull them through to the end, that we start to actually see and record their significant participation? And similarly here, you see that the number has also increased, and these are at intern and estate agency level. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've gone through the sections that we've actually tried to understand what transformation, the generic understanding of what it is, what it intends how it intends to transform our country, and why. But we've also started to understand basically our sector, how big it is, its economic contribution to our economy, and what role we play in our economy. But closer to home, we started to see now the stats, our transformation stats of our own provinces, to say when we talk transformation, how do we relate this to our sector? Where are we in terms of provinces? Where are we in terms of participation? And so on. And I'm hoping this now starts to actually gives you an understanding when we talk transformation, that how all of these elements start to actually interact with all of us for the healthy and really the sustainability of our own business. So, and I hope in our own space, in our own agencies, that we are able to start to say, how do I utilize in order for us, or how do I give my contribution in order for us to create the sustainability for our own sustainability of our own businesses? Of course, there's a BBBEE Act, but that's what we refer to as a sector code. And the property sector code is one of those that we refer to when we refer to the BBBEE code. As the code, as a property sector charter council, we take, or what we develop as our code and as our own target, we take guidance from the Act itself of the BBBEE Act. There are certain things that we can change. There are certain things that we cannot change as a sector code. So what a sector code does is we develop our own sector transformation strategies. So we basically go to the DTI and say, DTI, we understand that you need to have your inclusive growth in relation to transformation, and these are how you're going to actually do it. We acknowledge that and we will take that. However, as a sector, we have our own unique characteristics. We have our own unique nuances that we would like to build in relation to transformation. We don't want you to measure us as an event management company. We don't want you to measure us as a tourist company. We have our own differences as a sector, and therefore we want to contribute to that transformation, and we want to set our own targets. We don't want you to set the targets for us. We want to set our own targets because we understand the characteristics and the differences and the uniqueness of our own industry. And therefore, as a result, you then have a sector code. And sector codes become important because there are certain, we spoke about those 7 elements: ownership, management, control, preferential procurement, skill development, and so on. Those are the 7 elements of transformation. But our country needs far much more to transform. Amongst others, we talk about this transformation. Who's going to fund it? It's only the Financial Sector Charter Council that can do the funding of this transaction. We live in an information age. ICT connectivity has become our daily lives. Who is going to create that connectivity if we are to actually live up to the level of our Millennium Goals, up to the level of the rest of the development of our country would actually need to pick up to? Only ICT Charter can actually do that. So the point is, every sector has got certain, not every sector, but we've got 10 sectors that have registered to have their own sector codes. So in our own sector codes, our property sector codes, one of our pledge that we did is actually to drive developments in under-resourced areas. And we are the only people that can do that because transport is not going to do that. Tourism is not going to be able to do that. Forestry is not going to be able to do that. We are the only people that can drive development in under-resourced areas. I was saying to somebody some few weeks ago, before spring come up and we have this lovely weather, that some of us are so fortunate, you know, that it's cold outside, but sometimes you never even feel that it's cold outside. You drive out of a house, you come out of the house into the garage, come into a building, in the parking, come out, and somebody says, it's so cold. And you say, oh, it is? Because you haven't felt it. We are so fortunate. We live in those fortunate times. But we also live in those fortunate times that when we need to go withdraw, we need an ATM. We've got choices and options. Actually, even some of our options are driven by lousy things such as, oh, I don't like that security there. Oh, this road is lousy. Oh, there's a pothole there. I'm not going to go to this. There are still people that drive 4 hours to go withdraw money in ATMs. They withdraw, they'll go withdraw 50 Rand. Out of that 50 Rand, they'll probably spend the 30 or 20 Rand for that transport. They leave in the morning, the bus only comes back at 4 o'clock. We have options. And that's because there still are underdeveloped areas in our own country. So when we talk about property or property sector contributing to underdeveloped areas, we're talking maybe not necessarily in the residential, but the commercials, that's what they do. They do development of retail, shopping centers, and where they start to actually bring people, they employ people in the shopping centers so that they can start to earn income. And they actually start to put, these are, when you have shopping centers, you start to have ATMs so that people don't drive so many kilometers to actually withdraw. And a lot of our sectors, we do a balance. I mean, in our own sector, we've got also social partners and trade partners. The trade partners talk property in terms of rands and cents. Social partners talk property in terms of social development. So basically, for example, in the funding center, the bank will say, I can't put an ATM in this underdeveloped place because there is not enough feet for me to put an ATM. So the social partner will say, oh yeah, maybe so, but you've got enough, you probably make enough excess in Waterfront, you make enough excess in Sandton. You know what, that excess, put that excess in a place where you don't have enough feet so that people don't have to travel 4 hours to go withdraw 50 Rand from an ATM. So that is our contribution as a property sector into our economy. We are one of those of the sector charters that we got gazetted in 2012. These are all other 10 sector charters that got gazetted. Construction, tourism, forestry, and transport that got gazetted in 2009. You've got the chartered accountants that actually got gazetted in 2011. And we got gazetted in 2012, financial sector in 2013. Those are, amongst others, these are the charters that got gazetted, and we are among those. So each of these sectors decided we are different. We want us to measure it according to our own unique characteristics as a sector and the difference as a sector. So basically, when we develop these sector charters, we really anchor them under the generic codes. And we use the same principle, we use the same methodology, we use calculation, and we use the same definitions. Now, BEE is one unique legislation. And the uniqueness of this legislation, when we write legislations, they live perpetually. BEE is a time-based legislation. At some point, it will cease to exist. And because it would cease to exist, you need to be able to measure it. It intends to achieve a particular objective, and once that objective has been achieved, it will cease to exist. So therefore, for us to be able to say, are we there? Have we achieved that which it intends to achieve? We need to be able to measure that. And for us to measure it, we need to have the same principles. We need to use same methodology. We need to have same calculations. We used to have same definitions. So, and that's why some of the things, the key indicators remains the same, so that we can measure it and say, we've achieved where we wanted to achieve. We are at a point where everybody is participating in the mainstream, and we're going to have an open market, and everybody can participate from a same level and can participate in the mainstream economy. So measurement has become important. And in that measurement, it is important to keep those things the same, because otherwise we're going to be measuring apples with fruit salad and pears and strawberries, and of course we will end up with a nice fruit salad, but it won't actually give us what we actually need to measure. So as we measure, when we keep these things the same, there are certain things that we actually can have that are different as a sector code. We develop our own targets. We can develop our own weighting in terms of how important each of those elements, but we can also add our own unique elements like we did, development in under-resourced areas, which we added in our sector codes. The fortunate thing about the property sector code, unlike many other sectors, the 10 sectors that you saw earlier on in the board, is that we had embraced every single association that participates in our industry is part of a property sector code. And in the residential, we have all of those participants. The Institute is part of the sector, National Property Forum, SAFRI, RIBOSA, the Estate Agency Affairs Board, they are part of that forum. The targets that you see in the scorecard of the property sector code, it's the targets that we all discussed as the industry and have all agreed to say this should be the target that we need to actually abide ourselves to. So we've all participated in the sector. So in your participation with the various associations, they have been part of that contribution to the sector. We've spoken about what covers the scope, and of course those are the areas, and as we discussed earlier, those are the areas that discuss the sector, that covers us in the sector. What you need to understand when you look at the property sector code, you need to understand, am I a large entity or am I a QSE? Am I a small qualifying enterprise, or am I an exempted small enterprise? So, and what does each of those mean? According to the property sector code, is that a large entity are anything beyond 35 million. Medium entities, qualifying small enterprise, medium in terms of size, it's anything between 5 and 35. And exempted small enterprise is anything less than 5 million. So, and they would then be exempted out of the process anything less than 5 million. And this is for the generic, because I'll just about now will show you that using those 7 elements, what do we measure in terms of our property sector codes? If you are a large entity, now you've determined I'm a large entity. I'm not a medium, I'm not a small, I'm a large entity. How do you get measured? You've got all of those points out of 100. You've got all of those bonus points out of bonus points, which is 7, giving you 107, if you are a generic code. Okay? Remember we said we take clue or we take guidance as a property sector from generic codes. So these are the weighting points, and that says out of 100, how much do I get measured? And then out of 107, how much do I get measured? If you are a QSE, you choose, and this is the current legislation today now, you choose 4 of the 7, and if you add 4 of any 4, it's all out of 25, you get 100, and then you get bonus points out of 107. That is under the generic codes. Okay. And the question is always, when we look at...
The numbers you quoting, is that provision or is that...
No, okay. No, we haven't even... Oh, you mean the 35, it's 10 over. Yeah. The question, here, one of the elements, and I'm raising this point here, there's employment equity, whether it's at the large entities or it's at QSE, there's employment equity out of 50, and there's preferential procurement out of 20. If you are a QSE, there's employment equity out of 25, and there's also preferential out of 25. The question here for estate agents, and I know this question has been a question that has been daunting us for a long time. When I was actually in the estate agent, in the residential, running the voluntary association and estate agency, it used to be a question that used to daunt us. Are estate agents employees or are they service providers? In our particular case for the property sector charter, it does not matter where you count them. The point is just count them. You can count them as employees. You can count them as employees under employment equity, or you can count them under preferential if you're a QSE. If you are a large entity, you can count them under employment equity out of 15, or under preferential procurement out of 20, as long as you count them. But of course, you'll see if you're a large entity, it's better to probably count them as employment equity because the total is out of 15 here, and when it's preferential procurement, the total is out of 20 there. Okay, but the point is it does not matter where you count them, just count them. Okay. So now that actually now, the earlier discussion now starts to show you, we captured all of this information to be able to say, how do I use this for our entity? We said you first need to understand, are you a large? Are you a medium? Are you a small? If you're a large, what is your denominator? What makes up that denominator? If you're a medium size, what is the denominator? What makes up that denominator? You choose 4 out of the 25, and then that is a total. And you cover all of those elements. Okay. Now the question is, now we have these revised codes of good practice. Why are we revising these codes? For the reasons that we said earlier, this is a time-based legislation. We cannot, you remember, it's not stable and it's not stagnant. Things are moving, things are changing as we have along. It's revised because we've achieved certain things. We haven't achieved certain things. There's somewhere where we need to put more effort. There's somewhere where we've put effort before, and we don't need as much effort as we did before. So therefore, because we need to get to a certain point, there's a particular objective. Now we need to chase that objective in order to fight. So we've revised that codes in order for us to now to concentrate in areas that want the concentration that we need. So as you would know, or you may not know, but if I were to say, amongst others, we also had to align these codes with government priorities. The government priorities that also intend to drive the growth, the economic growth that we need. Amongst others, job creation, supply development, localization, industrialization, skill development. Some of these don't necessarily impact of us as much as others. Of course, skill development has become very key to us as a residential estate agency. Job creation has become very key to us as a priority in government. So we've refocused some of those elements. Okay, we are aligning all of those elements. So basically, all of the other sectors and all the other codes that are under the generic codes, they are currently using the revised codes. The sector codes you will see the sector codes have been extended. That's why they say here, they say that everybody else have been doing the revised code except the sector codes. The sector codes have been extended to have, there will be a new revised code from the 1st of November 2015. So the new sector codes for us, and including all the other 10 sector codes that you saw, will be effective from the 15th of November. So basically, it gives us a couple of months transaction, and now the year has gone by so quickly that by the time from May until now, it's 6 months transaction to actually look at our BE strategy and align it in line with our entities. The question is that how has it changed? The current code as it prevails today, we've got those 8 elements. The 7 key BEE2 elements, and the new one which we call economic development. This is where we dive development in under-resourced areas. We drive it here. This is a unique element for the property sector. The current property sector codes, we've got 8 elements. The revised codes that is applicable for all the other sectors have got 5 codes. Ownership, and then they've merged management control with employment equity. They've merged preferential procurement with enterprise development to become enterprise and supplier development. They've got socio-economic development to actually add up to 5 codes. The aligned sector code, property sector code, will have 7. This is the one that is coming in November. Will have 7 elements. You'll have ownership. We'll keep the split between management control and employment equity, and I'll explain later on why we are keeping the split. When the generic codes of good practice are merging these 2 to become 1, we are keeping them. We will merge the preferential procurement enterprise to become 1, just like the generic codes does. Socio-economic development we will keep. Economic development, which is the resource and under-resource development, will also keep, and that will be out of 7. So this is how you will see the revised codes. It's likely actually to be coming out for public commentary this week. In terms of our new codes, the current codes that's prevailing we went through is that between the medium-sized company are 5 to 35 and exempted are less than 5 million. The current code says you are only large if you are 50 and above, medium if you are between 10 and 50, and then you are exempted when you are 10 and below. However, for our property sector codes, those measurements are slightly different. The difference is that, and especially let's focus on the residential services, you will remain large if you are 35 million. You will remain a QSE when you are 2.5 and 35 million, and then you'll only become an EME when you are less than 2.5 million. And let me explain why. We took the database at the EAB. When we looked at the turnover, we looked at the number of agents. Over 70% of companies will be actually, it's only about 25%, between 25% and 30% that would be here. The rest are there. And that's why we lowered the threshold. And this was in a discussion, an agreement that we had in our industry to say, okay, if we are to transform the industry, we need to engage as many industries as possible to engage this, and then the threshold was lowered. But the same numbers was the same in the current scorecard that currently prevails now. In terms of our weighting, what is our weighting that is coming in November? Our current weighting is out of 107 as we sit here today. These are the weightings that we have. Ownership out of 20, management control out of 10, employment equity out of 15, skill development out of 15, preferential procurement and enterprise development out of 20 and 10 respectively, socio-economic development out of 2, and economic development out of 15. That's currently what prevails here today in our property sector code. The revised codes for all other sectors that has been effective from the 1st of May, this is the revised codes and they are weighting. From the 1st of November, our weighting would have changed to be out of 117, with the lead being out of preferential procurement and enterprise development out of 39, ownership out of 13, and skill development out of 19. Okay. earlier, if you're a QSE, what you used to do is that you were only out of the 7, you could choose only 4, and then 4 would give you 100 to choose, and you do 4 elements. However, the current change with the revised codes want you to specifically do all of those out of 100, but you'll see actually the weighting has changed from that of the bigger one. And we were also forced to align with the revised codes to actually do out of 105 and do all of those elements for the property sector codes from the 1st of November if you are a QSE. Earlier on, I said, as a property sector code, we will retain the split between management control and employment equity. The question is why? We have different segments in the property industry. We've got the listed sector, we've got unlisted sector, management, asset management, and you've got also estate agencies here. Out of all of those elements that we have, not every single one applies to everybody. We spoke about development in unresourced areas, which is putting up retail sectors, shopping center. It does not apply to estate agents. So you cannot measure us under development in under-resourced areas because that's not our business. We are broking, we sell houses. So that's why you will see under estate agents, that element that says economic development does not apply. Similarly, if you are a listed sector and you are an investor, you have money, you just put money there. You don't necessarily manage those properties. You give it to JHR, you give it to Brawl to manage those properties. So which means you won't have people. And if you don't have people, you can't be measured on employment equity. And if you can't be measured on employment equity, you can't do skill development. So it's exactly the same. So you would see that under the listed sector here, listed sector, the property loan stock, this is the listed sector. If you invest and you're just a property owner, you won't have people. And because you don't have people, you can't do skill development. So that you will be exempted out of those 2 elements. Similarly, for those of you that knows the unit trusts, the same thing. But by unit trust as well, because it's all pension fund, you cannot actually, for pension fund, you cannot even go do CSI under pension fund. Otherwise, you need to go to every pension fund holder and get a nod. And because it's impossible to do that, they are also exempted out of doing that pension fund. So that's why what we take this element and we say, we don't want you to measure us generically. We have our own unique differences. And some of our differences is part of these things, it's part of these structures that we have. That there are certain things we can do, but it may not necessarily apply to everybody. So only that which applies to somebody, they'll be measured against, and that doesn't apply to everybody, then they'll be measured against only that which applies to them. And I'm saying that which applies to them, not only because we want to or we don't want to, it's because by structure, by the nature of the structure, we can or we cannot do that element. So you would see that as estate agents, we are only measured against the 7 elements of the development as opposed to the whole elements. Somebody which is like an internal management, listed internal management, which is listed, but they do internal, like Growth Point, which is Growth Point is now about 55 billion rand, our biggest listed sector. They do all of those. Elements, so they'll be measured against that. You've got the redefines; they'll be measured against against all of that. But you've got the EMIRA, which is the unit trust, that only have a unit trust. They'll only be measured against that which they can do. With all of that revised, there were few things that came along. The BEE said there will be priority elements. Out of those priority, there were 3 priority elements: ownership, skill development, and enterprise and supplier development. So they're saying, okay, as part of the revision, as we revise this thing, for us to put more focus on, we will put more focus on employment equity, skill development, and supplier enterprise development. And that focus basically said, to start with on ownership, you need to achieve 40% of the net value target. So you need to get that threshold, the 40%. And that 40% says you need to have seen 40% of what of your ownership is. And how you measure that is that the current The current targets, we only measure, the current codes goes up to 100 in 9 years. We're saying we cannot do the thing, and you need to achieve the 40% threshold, which would be that. The skill development, they're saying in skill development, you also need to achieve 40% of the total weighting. What makes up skill development? 1, your leviable amount. Programs metric to black people, the leviable amount is 5% out of, you get 8 points. Of the disabled people as a percentage of leviable, 0.3, you get 3 points. The learnership, apprenticeship, and internship, people that you put in the program, 2.5%, and unemployed blacks that participate in learnership, apprenticeship, and internship are 2.5 points. That total is out of 19. But for you to realize 40%, you need to get 7.6%. I mean 7.6 points out of that 19 to be able to realize that point. Enterprise development, you need to get 40% of each of that subcategory, preferential procurement, supply development, and enterprise development. And how does that scorecard look like? Sorry. You need to have achieved the final. But what we are saying is that the minimum that you need to have achieved is at least 40. Yeah, in year 1, the minimum you need to achieve is 4. In year 2, the minimum you need to achieve is 20. The target is 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. But the 40% threshold that you need to achieve is that line. Okay, so the net equity value is that after certain years, after 1 year, if somebody has got in 9 years, when you buy into a company, you obviously become an owner. And the reason why there was net value equity is that people used to be paper owners of the company. There will be an owner in a company and they'll never realize a thing about that company. Now, what they put up the net equity value. That net equity value says after a period of time, you need to have realized the value of being an owner in that company. So what this says, it says after 1 year, you need to have realized 10% of that value. After 3 years, 40%. After 7 years, 80%. After 9 years, you need to have realized 100% of that value. And when they say you need to have realized in various forms, 1, it's either you've seen, it's a listed company, you need to have seen dividend in your account as an owner that aligns to that. Or you need to actually have paid a debt against the ownership of the business that you've bought into. But what this minimum priority is saying, whilst these are the targets, at the very least, we expect you to have achieved 40% of what you need to have realized in that year. At the very least, you need to have achieved 40% of that. Clear? Skill development, you measure as well. That's the skill development points. The 40%, it's the 40 of the total of 19. So basically, the total is out of 19. How you actually achieve the 7.6, it's immaterial, as long as you achieve 7.6, which is 40% of 19. Enterprise and supply development is out of 39 points, but it's made up out of 3 subcategories: preferential procurement, supply development, and enterprise development. And you need to achieve 40% of each of the subcategories. So under preferential procurement, you need to have achieved 9.6. Out of supply development, which is a total of 10, you need to achieve the threshold of 40%, which is 4. Out of supply development, out of 5, you need to at least achieve 2 points. Failure to achieve 40% of each of those 3 elements, you get discounted 1 level down of your total scorecard. So if you measure all of the scorecard and I'm level 3, you'll end up to becoming level 4. If you're level 4, you'll end up becoming level 5, and so it goes on. So there are those 3 elements, and this is for large entities. For QSE, you only choose 2 of the priority elements, of which ownership is compulsory. The other one, whether you do skill development and enterprise development, it would be your choice. So when we say, when we talk about you actually get discounted 1. If you are level 1, you'll go to level 2. If you are level 3, so that's how the discounting works. Well, if you fail to achieve the threshold, you'll get discounted 1 level down. But even if you don't get a threshold of 2, you still discounted 1 level. No, you don't get discounted twice. You only discounted one level down. Okay? Again, on ownership, you see that we've increased ownership. It went to 25%, but the properly scorecard went to 30%. And then we've added bonus points for disposal of assets and capital venture, and this is really for commercial entity, particularly in the listed. You will know that listed do a lot of disposal, and you'll see a lot of those coming along as well. So basically, our ownership for large companies, ownership scorecard, there's 3 sections. There's voluntary rights, the economic interest. So voluntary rights measures the people that have actually the power to actually give their votes. How much votes do you have? How much votes do you have out of the total? 25 plus 1, 10%. For black people, 25. For black females, 10% for those ownerships. And then you've got economic interest, which is really, for black people, 25%, for black females, 10%, and this is for the designated groups. This is employee schemes, beneficiaries, participants as co-ops, new entrants out of that total. And then for QSE as well, and of course the last one is net value we've covered. For QSE, you will see that it's not so onerous like large entities. It's much smaller, and then it's just more compact in terms of ownership, and it's out of 27. Management control. Management control are the people, are the directors that make decisions for companies, whether be at the strategic level or whether at operational level. So these are the people that have voting rights in the company, and these are the people that have executive direction of the company. And then lastly, you have obviously executive management. But the principle of a state agent, you can either scale it up or down. Sometimes in the state agencies, because we are small, you don't necessarily also have directors and executive managers. You can actually pull that together. If you pull it together, so if this is out of directors and black managers out of 2, it will be out of, you add this 2 and 2. The state agent, the verification agency will know how to do that. Now it will be out of 4. So meaning you can actually scope it up, or you can scope it down. If you don't have directors, you've got managers, you can do the same. They know how to do that when you tell them how you are structured in your organization. For QSE, once again, it's not so onerous. It only measures 2 levels down. For state agencies, you've got employment equity. Under normal employment equity in large companies, we have junior management, middle management, senior management, but we are quite aware that our state agencies, we don't have tiers of management. It's only the brawls, the JHI, the growth points, the big companies that have those level of management. So what we've agreed, that was with the RIBOSA, the Institute, National Forum and SAFRI, that what we will measure is practitioners, and then we will measure management. But what was unique about us, we measured administrators. Because I think actually it was Jan Leroux's contribution that said, you know, administrators are some of the people that we can start to pull up in our business because they work on the administration and they start to understand the business. And because they see how it does, and those people actually, they're probably even better than the new ones, the learners that we're pulling through, because they've lived through the business. Whether even in supporting us in our business and making calls or whatever, but they know what it takes. They see the management, they see all the practitioners, they support the practitioners, and therefore they understand. And this is, we're saying, using those administrators to also come through into the business where we can. Okay, skill development we've covered nicely. Enterprise development we also covered nicely, and I also showed you your points there. And then of course we need to meet that, we've covered that. One of them is CSI, this one we haven't covered. Socio-economic development, which you spend 1% net profit after tax. And the point is, for other sectors, it's out of 5. We reduced others to 2, because we're going to do development in under-resourced areas, as opposed to people relying on grants. We want to give them employment so that we take them out of the grant system so that we can lower the target. Another big change when they did the revised codes is the recognition of codes. So it's a little bit harder sometimes to actually achieve the points. So you would see that currently there's a little bit, they've introduced a new qualification, and we'll talk about, it's a little bit harder. So you'll see people that are between 85 and 100 that would have been level 2. Now they're slightly between, they'll be here, 85 and 75 and 85, either between the two levels. So it's slightly harder to get the points. The revision, I'm not going to go through the timing because I'm told the codes could come out for public commentary in the next few days, today, tomorrow. I hope it comes out. The 3 elements, we've covered that, and that really covers that section 4. So really, and I hope in section 4 we are able to understand the QSE, the residential, the threshold for QSE, and when will the sector codes become effective, and what would be the difference in the sector codes when it becomes effective. And last, in the last 5 minutes that I have, I just want to be able to share with you some of the amendment codes that we're having. We've got the amendment codes parallel to the revision of the codes that were the amendment codes. And the amendment codes come with actually the principle, fundamental principle of actually establishing the BEE Commission, which would almost be like an ombudsman of the BEE codes. So they will be overseeing the compliance of the codes, the investigations and complaints, and the main registrations of some of the BEE transactions that are coming through. But of course, that will be, it would be at a particular threshold. One important element, though, is that they'll also be dealing with fronting. And how we define fronting, actually, and I remember when I sit in the presidential BEE committee, the question was, what is fronting? And in a nutshell, simple, fronting is misrepresentation of facts. That's all it is. So it's basically, but they've defined it as actually directly or indirectly undermining or frustrating the achievement of BEE objectives or implementation thereof. And if you are found fronting or misrepresenting the facts, there's also a fine of up to 10 years imprisonment or 10% of your annual turnover, or both. One of the questions is that we did our first reporting this last year, in 2014. And this is the first time when we had to report, because we got gazetted in 2012, because of course then 2012, 2013. 2014 was when we started to have actual facts in terms of the scorecards. So we have to report because we have to say, are we achieving or are we not achieving? And how close are we to where we are achieving, or how far are we to where we are achieving? As the property sector code, we did not ask everybody to report. The sector decided we will choose companies that contribute 75% of the total value of the industry. You know the trillion size? So we took all the listed sector. The listed sector, they add up to 400 billion market cap. There's 27 of them. 450 billion. We took all the listed sector. For the residential, I only chose 5 companies. Only chose 5, top 5. I couldn't get one. We couldn't get one report. And I think the challenge that when you sit in parliament and portfolio and you're saying, did you say you are 4.9 trillion and going to 6.5 trillion? You don't know where you stand. You don't know where you're achieving. You don't know where the difficulties are. You've set targets and you just don't know where you are going. And you're saying you are one of our biggest contributory sector in our economy. And you say you don't want to be governed or you don't want to be regulated, you want to set your own targets. How do you justify that? And that becomes a challenge, because the point would have been, I only chose 5 because we took only 5 that thought 5 in the residential, including all the others that contribute, because we wanted to say we are starting and we're only going to take the big 5 so that we understand where we are going, what we are achieving, and therefore this is where our target is based. And also we wanted to also even justify our own targets, that we've put 6 as opposed to 10 because this is where we are. But we couldn't even understand the base because we never had any of our participants submitting their scorecards to us. But I'm saying the point was that it's been a challenge to actually justify that in Parliament, to the Portfolio Committee and many others because of these reasons. So the point is that we will be doing our second annual, and I think, obviously if we're going in the same way as we're doing, it's going to be challenging. We want to regulate our own industry. We want to set our own targets because we understand our industry better. But unless if we all cooperate and we work together to be able to say, guys, and we don't use those targets. When you submit your submission in terms of how you are doing, we don't use it individually. We actually consolidate it. We use it as a conglomerate number and says, you know what, this is where we have a challenge. We can achieve this. This is not doable. This is doable. Oh no, this we can, this we can do with our eyes closed. But we don't have that information. And therefore, the politicians come, we think we want this. He says, but we can't justify that. But I can't also deny that because we don't have the base and information. But we have started our second year reporting, and we'll probably be going to the same, to the big companies. Once again, we'll use the same strategy to go to the big companies in order to report where we are going as a sector. So basically, you have agencies that come to do your accreditation. These are the SANAS agencies. But for the state agencies, you also have IRBA, Institute of Regulated Auditors, Board of Auditors. They can also do your certificate as long as they've got the extension of scope to also do your BEE. So you can request them to actually do that. They will come in, they obviously brief you, they give you the plans, they tell you what they want, and then they apply what they need to do in order to get their certificate. This is normally the kind of thing that you get as a certificate, as a BE certificate, and then it has all these various information on the certificate. That's what you will get. It's something that looks like that. But also including that, what it will have, you'll see it will show you there, as part of that information, it will show you what is your score. So out of the number of elements that you have, that certificate shows you there what is your score. That 90.4, you will see that if you get 90.47, it starts to relate to basically where you are into the level, and this is what it shows on your certificate, level 2, and this is how your performance would be. So I said earlier on, you'll see that they've revised the qualification. If you are between 85 and 100, you start to become a level 3. So it's going to be a little bit harder to get the scores as you achieve it. For those that are between 65 and 75, you are either there as a level 6 or a level 7, whilst currently you would then be a level 4. So it means that we need to actually achieve harder to actually achieve that. And in terms of, obviously, if you are a micro enterprise, you will be exempted to do BEE, and you become automatically a level 4. And if you're 100% black owned and currently now, or 51% black female owned, you become a level 3. And this is currently right now. So I think that covers all of my presentation.